My name is Daniel, and I should have never set foot inside that abandoned hotel, that it was supposed to be just another exploration. The old Holloway Grand Hotel had been shut down for decades, its once glamorous halls now rotting under layers of dust and decay. There were stories, of course, whispers of guests who checked in but never checked out, of voices echoing through empty corridors. But I was never one to believe in ghost stories until that night. I slipped through a broken side door, my flashlight casting long, uneasy shadows along the peeling wallpaper. The lobby was eerily intact, as if it had been frozen in time. A massive chandelier hung above, its crystals dulled with age. The check-in desk still had a bell, covered in a thick layer of dust. I tapped it. The chime echoed, unnaturally loud. Then the elevator dinged. I turned, my stomach tightening. The doors slid open, revealing an empty, dimly lit interior. The button for the 7th floor was already pressed. I wasn't planning on going up, but the doors didn't close. The air in the lobby grew heavier, colder. My breath came out in a mist. I felt watched, then a whisper, soft and inviting. Going up, my blood ran cold. I bolted for the exit, but the lobby had changed. The door I came through was gone. The grand staircase twisted impossibly, stretching higher than it should. The chandeliers flickered. The front desk bell rang on its own. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate. I turned just as a figure stepped out of the elevator. It was dressed in a dusty bellhop uniform, its face obscured by darkness except for its grin. A wide, unnatural grin. It took a step toward me. I ran. I sprinted through endless corridors that shouldn't have existed, past doors that led nowhere, past mirrors that reflected things that weren't me. My flashlight flickered, and in every brief burst of light, I saw them. More figures, more grins, more guests. I don't remember how I escaped. One moment I was trapped, the next I was outside, gasping for air under the cold night sky. The hotel loomed behind me, unchanged, indifferent. But I know I didn't leave alone, because every night, since then, when I turn off my lights, I hear it, a chime, and a whisper, going up. My name is Daniel, and I should have never set foot inside that abandoned hotel. It was supposed to be just another exploration. The old Holloway Grand Hotel had been shut down for decades, its once glamorous halls now rotting under layers of dust and decay. There were stories, of course, whispers of guests who checked in but never checked out, of voices echoing through empty corridors. But I was never one to believe in ghost stories until that night. I slipped through a broken side door, my flashlight casting long, uneasy shadows along the peeling wallpaper. The lobby was eerily intact, as if it had been frozen in time. A massive chandelier hung above, its crystals dulled with age. The check-in desk still had a bell, covered in a thick layer of dust. I tapped it. The chime echoed, unnaturally loud. Then the elevator dinged. I turned, my stomach tightening. The door slid open, revealing an empty, dimly lit interior. The button for the 7th floor was already pressed. I wasn't planning on going up, but the doors didn't close. The air in the lobby grew heavier, colder. My breath came out in a mist. I felt watched, then a whisper, soft and inviting, going up. My blood ran cold. I bolted for the exit, but the lobby had changed. The door I came through was gone. The grand staircase twisted impossibly, stretching higher than it should. The chandeliers flickered. The front desk bell rang on its own. Then, footsteps slow, deliberate. I turned just as a figure stepped out of the elevator. It was dressed in a dusty bellhop uniform, its face obscured by darkness, except for its grin. A wide, unnatural grin. It took a step toward me. I ran. I sprinted through endless corridors that shouldn't have existed, past doors that led nowhere, past mirrors that reflected things that weren't me. My flashlight flickered, and in every brief burst of light, I saw them. More figures, more grins, more guests. The corridors stretched infinitely. The paintings on the walls changed as I passed them, portraits of unfamiliar people, each of them staring at me. Their expressions twisted the farther I ran. Some smiled, some frowned, but all of them watched. I turned a corner and nearly tripped over something, an old suitcase, sitting in the center of the hall. The tag was faded, the name scrawled in handwriting I didn't recognize. It was mine. Panic surged through me. I hadn't brought anything with me. I had never stayed in this hotel before, had I? The air turned thick, suffocating. The walls felt closer, the ceiling lower. Shadows moved unnaturally across the floor, stretching toward me. Then, a voice, deep and echoing, rumbled through the hallway. "Your room is ready." The doors lining the corridor burst open all at once, revealing nothing but blackness inside. The scent of old wood and something foul wafted out. The figures emerged, twisted versions of people who had checked in and never checked out. They moved toward me, their mouths stretching into unnatural smiles, their hollow eyes locking onto mine. I forced my legs to move, sprinting toward the nearest stairwell. My heart pounded so loudly I couldn't hear my own breathing. The stairs twisted as I climbed, leading me to hallways I hadn't seen before, hallways that shouldn't exist. Finally, I found a door with an exit sign flickering above it. I shoved it open and stumbled into the night. The cold air hit me like a wave, and when I turned back, the hotel was different. It looked untouched, pristine, as if it had never been abandoned at all. The windows glowed warmly, and inside, I saw silhouettes of people moving, chatting, drinking at the bar. The grand doors creaked open slightly, and standing there was the bellhop. Still grinning, he raised a hand and tipped his hat. I ran until my lungs burned. I never went back. But every night, when the world is silent and I start to drift off to sleep, I hear it, a chime and a whisper going up. My name is Ryan, and I should have never stepped into that abandoned asylum. It was supposed to be a thrill-seeking adventure. My friends and I had always been drawn to urban exploration, and the old Blackwood Asylum was the ultimate prize. It had been abandoned for decades, its halls rumored to be filled with the echoes of its tragic past. Stories of vanished trespassers and ghostly figures lurking in the windows only added to its dark allure. The moment we crossed the rusted gate, an eerie stillness settled over us. The air was thick with decay and something else, something unseen. We pushed forward, flashlights slicing through the darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper, overturned gurneys, and shattered glass. Then came the whispers. At first I thought it was just the wind slipping through the broken windows, but as we moved deeper inside, the sounds grew clearer, soft voices, murmuring just out of reach. My breath hitched when I realized they weren't coming from one place. They were everywhere, surrounding us. "Guys, we should leave," Sarah whispered, her grip tightening on my arm. But Jason, always the skeptic, laughed. "It's just the building settling. Don't be paranoid," we continued, despite every instinct telling me to turn back. The deeper we went, the colder it got. Our breaths came out in misty puffs, even though it was the middle of summer. Then, we reached the patient rooms. The doors stood slightly ajar, each one leading into a small, crumbling cell. A few still had their beds bolted to the floor, rusted chains dangling from the walls. The whispering grew louder. I could swear I heard my name. That's when we saw it. A single wheelchair sat at the end of the hall, facing away from us. It hadn't been there before. As we stared, the chair moved, slowly, deliberately. It rolled backward, scraping against the cracked tiles until it faced us. Empty then. The doors slammed shut, every single one. Sarah screamed. Jason cursed. We ran, sprinting for the exit, but the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, the asylum itself refusing to let us go. Shadows flickered in our peripheral vision, and the whispers turned into agonized wails. Finally, we burst through the main doors, collapsing onto the dirt. The night air was warm again. The asylum stood silent, as if nothing had happened. We never spoke of that night. Jason, once the skeptic, refused to say a word about what he saw. Sarah moved away, swearing she could still hear the whispers in her dreams, and me. I haven't stepped into an abandoned building since, because I know now some places never forget, and some doors should never be opened. My name is Mark, and I wish I had never entered that abandoned school. The old Blackwood Academy had been shut down for decades, its once pristine halls now crumbling under the weight of time. Rumors swirled about why it had closed, stories of students who vanished, a headmaster who lost his mind, and classrooms that seemed to whisper when no one was around. It was the kind of place that begged to be left alone. But of course, I didn't listen. I was drawn to its mystery, desperate to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden behind its boarded-up doors. With nothing but a flashlight and a growing sense of regret, I stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and decay. My footsteps echoed unnaturally down the empty corridor, bouncing off the graffiti-covered walls. Desks were overturned. Lockers stood half open, their contents spilling onto the dusty floors. Yet, despite the ruin, something about the school felt untouched, like it was waiting for something or someone. Then, I heard it, a faint tapping, steady, rhythmic. It was coming from one of the classrooms. My flashlight flickered as I moved toward the sound, my breath catching in my throat. The door creaked as I nudged it open, revealing a room frozen in time. Desks neatly arranged, a chalkboard covered in faint writing, and at the very front a single desk, the lid slowly opening and closing on its own. The tapping stopped. I froze, my pulse thundering in my ears. Then, from the back of the room, a whisper, "You're late." Every hair on my body stood on end. The desk slammed shut with a deafening bang, and suddenly, the classroom wasn't empty anymore. Figures sat in the desk's shadows, their faces blurred and indistinct. The teacher's chair creaked as it turned, revealing something that wasn't human staring back at me with hollow black eyes. The door behind me slammed shut. I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering violently as the whispers grew louder. The figures in the desks twitched, their heads snapping toward me in unison. The teacher stood up. I ran. I don't know how I got out, but somehow, I did. 1 second, I was inside, surrounded, and the next I was outside, gasping for breath under the cold night sky. The school loomed behind me, silent, unmoving, but I could feel something watching from the broken windows. I never went back, and I never will, because sometimes, when I pass by that place, I swear I hear it again, the tapping, and the whisper, "You're late." My name is Alex, and I should have never entered that abandoned mansion. The old Holloway Manor had stood on the outskirts of town for over a century. Its decaying structure loomed over the landscape like a forgotten relic, its windows shattered, its gates rusted shut. People whispered about the disappearances, the eerie lights that flickered at night, the sounds of furniture moving on its own. But, like an idiot, I ignored the warnings. I had always been fascinated by the unknown, and when my best friend Ethan dared me to step inside, I couldn't resist. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, I pried open the rotting wooden door and stepped into darkness. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of mildew. My footsteps echoed eerily through the vast, empty halls. The wallpaper was peeling, the grand staircase sagged under years of neglect, and cobwebs clung to the chandeliers above. Yet, despite its decay, The house didn't feel abandoned. It felt occupied. I pressed forward, the floorboards groaning beneath me. As I turned a corner, a massive painting caught my eye. It depicted the Holloway family stiff formal, their expressions eerily lifeless. But one thing sent a chill through my bones. The eyes in the painting. They were looking at me. I swallowed hard and moved past it, convincing myself it was just a trick of the light. But as I ventured deeper, I noticed something else: faint footprints in the dust. They led toward a door at the end of the hall. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn around. Instead, I reached out and pushed the door open. Inside was a dimly lit parlor, untouched by time. A single armchair sat before a cold fireplace, a book resting on its seat, as if someone had just been reading it. And then I heard a whisper. Not from behind me, not from the hall, from the chair. The book slammed shut. I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering wildly. The shadows in the room twisted, elongating, stretching toward me. A guttural growl filled the air, and the chair scraped across the floor. Turning slowly to face me, I ran. I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was in that room, the next I was outside, gasping for breath. The mansion stood silent, dark, indifferent to my terror. I never told Ethan what I saw that night. I barely believe it myself, but sometimes, when I pass the Holloway Manor, I swear I see someone standing in the window, watching, waiting, and I know if I ever step inside, a demon won't be coming back.